Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I hope everyone is doing well. Inshallah, we'll be continuing with our next lesson of Al-Waraqāt of Sheikh Abdul Malik al-Juwaini. Last time we talked about the Anwa' al-Ahkam, and then before that we spoke about the Ma'ana Uṣūl al-Fiqh, and then before that we spoke about the A'imma Kiram, the different authors of different books who did a great contribution on the work of Imam Abdul Malik al-Juwaini, Al-Waraqāt. Inshallah, today's lesson will be covering the definition of some of the terminologies of Ilm al-Uṣūl, the science of Uṣūl al-Fiqh. Inshallah, Bismillah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قال المؤلف رحمه الله تعالى: والفقه أخص من العلم، والعلم معرفة المعلوم على ما هو به في الواقع، والجهل تصور الشيء على خلاف ما هو به الواقع، والعلم الضروري ما لم يقع عن نظر واستدلال كالعلم الواقع بإحدى الحواس الخمس الظاهرة، وهي السمع والبصر والشم والذوق واللمس أو بالتواتر. وأما العلم المكتسب فهو الموقوف على نظر والاستدلال، والنظر هو الفقر في حال المنظور فيه، والاستدلال طلب الدليل، والدليل هو المرشد إلى المطلوب لأنه علامة عليه، والظن تجويز أمرين أحدهما أظهر من الآخر، والشك تجويز أمرين لا مزية لأحدهما على الآخر.
Okay, stops there for you. Okay. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salamu ala Sayyidil Mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd. Now the Mu'allif, Sheikh Abdul Malik al-Juwaini, has begun the lesson by telling us some of the definitions of terminologies of Ilm al-Uṣūl, meaning the science of Uṣūl al-Fiqh. The first word he wants us to know is al-Fiqh. What al-Fiqh means. We have already spoken about al-Fiqh before, what fiqh means. And we said, when we talk about fiqh, we talk about those masail that have ijtihad in them, right? And they're called dhanni masail, not the qat'i masail, because qat'i masail do not have ijtihad, hence there's no fiqh used in that. All you do is ita'ah, right? So fiqh is used for those masail that have ijtihad in them, i.e. dhanni masail. So Mu'allif goes, rahmatullah alayhi, and he says, al-fiqhu akhassu min al-ilmi. Fiqh is more specific than ilm. There's a little principle Imam Mahalli mentioned in his sharh of Al-Waraqāt. He says, kullu fiqhin ilmun wa laysa kullu ilmin fiqhan. That every fiqh, meaning every fiqh type of knowledge, is part of ilm. But not every knowledge, meaning every type of knowledge, is fiqh. Is that clear? So ilm could be used for ilm al-nahu. We have the science of nahu. We have the science of sarf. We have the science of usul al-hadith. We have all these different sciences, and the term ilm could be used for them. But when we use the word fiqh, it becomes more specific. Because ilm is general, it's aam. And fiqh is khas. And fiqh is used for what? Masail. Allati fiha al-ijtihad. Is that clear to you? So he's saying, al-fiqh akhassu min al-ilmi. Fiqh is more exclusive than ilm. And now, after mentioning this, he goes and he says, what is the definition of ilm? Ma'rifatul ma'lumi ala ma huwa bihi. For you is al-waqi'. I don't have al-waqi' here in my nuskha. He said, what is ilm? Ilm, I'm going to translate literally or somewhat with the literal sense. Recognizing the information ala ma huwa bihi, upon its reality. Knowing something the way it is supposed to be known by you. The one who came up with that knowledge and his understanding When you have ilm of it, it means you have the exact same knowledge of that person who came up with that. Is that making sense to you? Ilm is to recognize that information upon its specific and exact meaning. That's what fiqh is, ilm is. What is jahl? تصور الشيء على خلاف ما هو به. Ignorance, as we translate. But if you were to ask the lughawi meaning of jahl or jahala is what? Tasawwur mean imagining. Imagining something على خلاف ما هو به, upon that which is not the reality of that thing. Meaning is completely opposite. That's why jahil is called jahil, because he thinks this is the truth, but it's not the truth. Can you call kuffar jahil? Yes, because they think these stones are the ones that have created them. But they're forgetting that no, it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You with me? So ilm is to recognize something with its absolute exactness. Jahal is to not have knowledge, rather to assume that something is the way you think, but it's not the reality. It's not the exact truth. Clear? Now, Imam Mahalli explains in depth. I want you to write this down. Two terms. Basit, basin yata, basitu, and murakkab. Murakkab, compound. What is murakkab and what is basit? Basit in nutshell basically means simple. It's like simple jahal, ignorance. Like very simple ignorance. Murakkab means compound ignorance. Tell me which one is bad. Murakkab or basit? Murakkab is bad. Philosophers, the falasifa, they would say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is what? Is hadith. Has a huduth, meaning has a sort of he came into existence, meaning he has a beginning and an end. Am I right? Despite knowing that something that is metaphysical, that is beyond your understanding, cannot have a bidayah and a nihaya. Am I right? When a philosopher acts like he knows what Allah's existence is like, he becomes jahil murakkab, meaning a ignorant person who adds more on his ignorance. You with me? Basit is what? A person says, I don't know. If I don't know the science of Uṣūl al-Fiqh and I begin to answer it, that means I'm acting more ignorant. But if you come to me and ask me, hey, Afan, do you know what hadith mean? And I go, I don't know. That's basit. I'm sharing with you which I don't know, and I'm not making something up. That's basit. Simple. Which one is worse? Murakkab is worse than basit. Hence, Imam Mahalli says here, jahal refers to murakkab here, not basit. Clear? So, thinking of something upon its fake reality. Upon its fake reality, not upon its exact truth, is jahal murakkab. This is what the book is talking about. Moving on. You read ilm daruri. Ilm means knowledge. Daruri means important, necessary. Now, daruri is a broad term. Daruri in Arabic means necessary. But if you go to mantiq, from the logical point of view, it basically means something that you can never neglect. It's always there. You don't need to think about it. You don't have to infer. It just comes in your mind. And it's usually what? Your five senses. It's those five senses that you can never neglect. Like things you see, things you hear, things you smell, things you taste, things you touch, can never be denied. Once I touch this, can I say it's not, if you tell me this is a table and I touch it, obviously I know. I don't have to think too much because I already know this. It's what? From my hawasul khams, my five senses. But he adds one more thing. Look, he says bit tawaturi. Tawatur is the same thing. Something that has come to you with an exhaustive chain, a chain that can never be denied. He says that's also ilmu daruri. Quran is what? Ilmu daruri to us now. Because Quran is mutawatir. Can we deny Quran, Murad? Can we deny mutawatir hadith or hadith al-Qudsi? We cannot. Because they're mutawatir. If someone denies them, he's denying ilmu daruri. which means a knowledge that you don't have to think about. You just say, hey, this is the reality. You don't have to prove it to be the real truth, because it is yes, it is the absolute truth, because it's tawatur, because it's ilm daruri. Now, on the opposite of it is ilm muktasab, meaning you have to earn it. Ilm means knowledge, muktasab means you have to earn it. What are those? How do you do it? فهو الموقوف على النظر والاستدلال, that is dependent on you doing nadhr, meaning you going and looking into it. والاستدلال, you have to go and get the evidences. Otherwise, it won't make sense to you. Now, the example Imam Mahalli gives in his book of Sharh al-Waraqāt, he says, al-alamu hadithun. The world is huduth, has hadath, meaning it came to an existence, therefore it has an end. And how do you figure out that alam is a hadith? It's not qadim. It's but look at the things. We have trees. It grows bigger and stronger in spring. What happens in autumn? It breaks down, it sheds away. Then what happens when it's winter? It basically has a lot of snow on it, and then it messes up the whole branch and the whole root, right? What happens? What does it show? It has huduth in it. It has a bidayah and a nihaya. Similarly, insan, when a person living in the alam is born and he dies, what does it show? We're hadith. We're given an existence from the beginning till the end. That's it. So when a person is living in alam, what does it mean by the alam then? That means the alam also has hadith. It has a beginning and an end. Lahu bidayah wa nihaya. Make sense to you? This is, how do we get this? By ilm al-muktasab. By you extracting and looking at things and observing things. So the translation of the other would be observation. You're observing things. So ilm al-muktasab, it is that which is dependent on you observing, you surveying, you doing research, and then proving it. Correct? What is another? Now we talked about these two terms, al-mawquf, al-nadhr wal-istidlal. What is nadhr? Look at it now. Another means to see, right? Another means al-mushahada, to see. Now what does it mean when we talk about from the research base, tahqiqi base? هو الفكر في حال المنظور فيه. I'm going to break it down. هو الفكر, it is the contemplation and thinking. في, in, حال, in the state. Al-manظور فيه, which is looked at. Let's say I want to know what the word aqsam mean, ta'rif mean in this page. I'm going to look at the word. As a student of sarf, what's going to happen to me? Oh, ta'rif. Let me break it down. Okay, ta is this mazid fi word. That means it's an extra word. Okay, I have to search of ayn, ra, and fa. What am I doing here? I'm doing fikr. I'm thinking about which I'm looking at. Right? Another is what? It is to contemplate contemplate over the state of what is being looked at. Make sense? So if you're doing a research on tafsir bil ma'na, what are you doing? You're looking at tafsir bil ma'na and you're looking at the text and you're just contemplating over it and then making sense out of it. That's what nadhr is. Make sense? What is istidlal? Musannif says. Musannif meaning the Imam Mahalli. Sharh al-Waraqāt, he says, another istidlal are same thing. So I want you to make an arrow saying same. Nadhr and istidlal are both same thing. There is no difference between the two. There is no farq عند المصنف. As you can find Imam Mahalli's sharah. Istidlal is what? طلب الدليل, looking for an evidence. Same thing as nadhr. What are you doing in nadhr? You're trying to look for an evidence, right? For usul al-fiqh. What is a dalil? Now you go and do nadhr and istidlal, and what do you come up with? Dalil. What is dalil? هو المرشد إلى المطلوب. It is a guide towards matlub. What you're looking for. If I'm looking for the meaning of ta'rif, where am I going to find it? In dictionary, in qamus. When I open and I find the word, that becomes dalil, meaning the definition, the meaning of ta'rif becomes dalil for me. Hey, this is the dalil of it, that this is what it means. Correct? Make sense to you? Now, dhan and shak are two different terminologies using again. So, nadhr, istidlal, and dalil are together. Yes? Ilm daruri and ilm muktasab are together. Ilm and jahal are together. Fiqh is just in the beginning, just to tell us, ilm is more general than fiqh. Now we're going into dhan and shak. Now let me explain dhan and shak before we get into it. Dhan is, you have two options. You have two options and you have a preference in them. You have a preference in one of them. Example Imam Mahalli gives in the Quran, in his book, is that he says a person is doubtful if Zayd is standing or sitting. Yeah? The dhann will say, assumption will say, oh, I think he's standing. What is happening? You prefer one over the other. Correct? No, Zayd is standing, he's not sitting. This is a dhann. What is shak? You're confused between if Zayd is standing or sitting, but you have no option. So you don't choose anything. Right?
You don't have an opinion.
You don't have an opinion, but you just don't know how to make it preference because they both look the same. They both look so equal. Now I'm going to translate literally for you. Okay, al-dhannu tajweezu amrayn. It is to select one of the meanings, one of the matters. It is to choose one of the matters. Why? أحدهما أظهر من الآخر. Because one of them is more apparent than the other one. One of them looks more clearer than the other one. What is shak now? تجويز أمرين لا مزية لأحدهما عن الآخر. It is to choose between two options, but guess what? لا مزية لأحدهما عن الآخر. But you're not able to select because you cannot find one better than the other one because they both look similar. Right? That's what happens in when a person asks you who's better, Ali radiyallahu anhu or Uthman radiyallahu anhu, what would you say? I'm in shak because you cannot choose between them because they both are equal in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? In our eyes they both are equal. Maybe Allah has a little preference over between them, but for us both are equal. There is no dhann there, there's shak there for us. Just to give a practical example. Done? Now, do you have turuqu ala sabil ijmali there? Just read that part. Because I want to explain this and inshallah we'll end it off here.
وأصول الفقه طرقه على سبيل الإجمال وكيفية الاستدلال بها.
Did you have anything else after? وَمَعْنَى قَوْلِنَا?
No.
Okay, you don't have that, no problem. Now this is very important. Imam Mahalli, I'm telling you, he explains it so nicely. He tells us what is the whole purpose of Uṣūl al-Fiqh. I want you to understand one thing. Uṣūl al-Fiqh is there to make us understand the fiqh. Does that make sense to you? Uṣūl al-Fiqh is there to make us understand the fiqh. What is more practical, Uṣūl al-Fiqh or fiqh?
More practical.
More practical for our lives.
Fiqh.
Fiqh, good answer. Uṣūl al-Fiqh is not practical. It is theoretical. Fiqh is practical. But what does Uṣūl al-Fiqh do? It gives enough equipment to a scholar, talib al-ilm, to make that theory into a practicality. Make sense to you? I want you to write down these three things. Uṣūl al-Fiqh does three things. Number one is mentioned in Sharh al-Mahalli, Imam Mahalli's Sharh of Al-Waraqāt. Uṣūl al-Fiqh helps us It helps us grasp the ruling of fiqh. That's the first thing it does for us. The whole purpose of Uṣūl al-Fiqh is what? To come from theoretical format to the practical format by going to the fiqh. علم أصول الفقه توقفا ويتوقف ويدل على توقف الفقه. That's what it does. That's the first thing. Number two, Uṣūl al-Fiqh helps us drive ruling. It makes us extract, istikhraj of the rulings.
Derive rulings?
Yeah, derive rulings. This is haram, this is wajib. What that is sunnah according to some is wajib according to some. Sunnah of dhuhr is sunnah mu'akkada. For some is just sunnah. Or for some is nafil. Sajda sahu, what is it? Surah al-Fatiha, what is it? Wajib, rukun, what is it? All of that, what helps us with it? Who helps us? Uṣūl al-Fiqh helps us come up with helps us drive ruling. Number three, it gives us principles. It gives us principles. I'm sure those who have studied Uṣūl al-Fiqh, I'm sure you know this murad too. Khas, Aam, Mujmal, Bayan. That's the whole purpose of Uṣūl al-Fiqh. Uṣūl al-Fiqh will teach you what is khas, what is Aam, what is Zahir, what is Khafi. And then you have to use all of those principles to apply them to come up with the ruling, which is the second part which we have covered. Right? Come up with the ruling. Third helps us with it. Third thing helps us with it. And the fourth one, you can add this too. Who does all of these things? An alim, a mujtahid. So, a qualified scholar does all of the following above. This is the fourth one. So Imam Mahalli says, in order for you to know what fiqh is all about, usul al-fiqh is all about, let me tell you. The first thing you have to know, you need to have a mujtahid. You need to have a mujtahid who has an understanding of what? That whole purpose of usul al-fiqh is to lead to fiqh. From theoretical sense to practical sense. Number two, a mujtahid will use the principles he has learned in usul al-fiqh, like khas, am, amr, mutlaq. Amr gives the meaning of wajib by default. Nahi, haqiqa, majaz. All those terms, he grasps them, and then what does he do? The third thing, he comes up with a ruling. Fatiha is wajib. Fatiha is sunnah. Fatiha is a rukun because there's a hadith for it. There's a mutawatir hadith. There's a Quranic verse that's mutawatir. He does all of these things. So he does three things. Good? So in alim, a mujtahid does three things. He grasps the principles mentioned in the usul al-fiqh. Number two, he then turns them into ahkam. Then what does he do after? He brings it in the form of fiqh so people can act upon those ahkam. Make sense to you? This is the whole purpose of usul al-fiqh as Imam Mahalli is explaining to us, inshaAllah ta'ala. And let me just translate this so you understand. There's one principle that we should write down. I have it written down here. Imam Mahalli says this: طرق أصول الفقه إجمالية طرق الفقه تفصيلية فرعية. The route, the path of usul al-fiqh is very obscure. It's very obscure. But the path of fiqh is explanatory. It's very explanatory, as we just learned. If somebody wants to teach you from usul al-fiqh, amr usually is used for what? Mutlaq al-wujub. That by default, when you see a conjugation of amr, what does it refer to? A wajib act, right? That's what? That's the job of usul al-fiqh. But when a scholar gets into it and he comes up with a ruling, that's fiqh. That's fiqh. So what does it do? It explains and expounds upon the usul al-fiqh term in tafsil. In tafsil. Make sense? No. Fatiha is not wajib. It's rukun because of such and such ruling. And because of such and such qaida. Or the such and such mustalah that we have learned. Is that making sense to you, inshaAllah? That's what Imam Mahalli explained in his book, Al-Waraqāt. And Imam Abdul Malik al-Juwayni says, Usul al-Fiqh, what is it? طُرُقُهُ عَلَى سَبِيلِ الْإِجْمَالِ. When a person learns Usul al-Fiqh, what happens? It's not practical for him. That is why we have at-Tadribat al-Waraqāt, because it makes everything practical. You're able to apply those rulings and those principles and turn them into an application. Correct? وَكَيْفِيَّةُ الْإِسْتِدْلَالِ. The whole job of Usul al-Fiqh is to help you derive rulings. Because without Usul al-Fiqh, you cannot come up with a ruling. Purpose of Usul al-Fiqh is not to memorize them and just to learn the theoretical sense of it, but rather to learn the practical sense of it by applying it, by making it wajib, sunnah, mustahab, all of that. Inshallah, with this we'll end our today's session where we have covered ta'arifu bi ba'di mustalahati ilm usul al-fiqh. We've covered some of the definitions of the terminologies of science of usul al-fiqh, where we talked about ilm, the definition of ilm, definition of jahl, daruri, ilm al-muktasab, nazar, istidlal, dalil, nadhan, shak, usul al-fiqh, and the explanation on that. Inshallah, in our next session we'll talk about the different chapters of usul al-fiqh, and then we'll begin with the aqsam al-kalam, the different categories of sentence, kalam. And we'll go into that inshallah, where we'll talk about different terms inshallah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept this from us and make this in our mizan hasana. Wa jazakumullahu khairan. Wa assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.